The story begins with a girl named Becky who is driving her car to work. Becky works at a restaurant in Chadwick City. After a while, she reaches the restaurant, parks her car, and heads inside. As she enters, Kevin walks up to her. He also works at the restaurant. Together, they step inside, where their manager, Sandra, is waiting with the rest of the staff. Once everyone has gathered, Sandra looks serious. She tells them that someone left the main door open last night, and because of that, $1,000 was stolen from her office. She warns everyone to never leave the doors unlocked again, and reminds them to double-check the locks before leaving. After that, Sandra tells everyone to get to work and busies herself with her own tasks. Slowly, the restaurant starts filling up with customers. After a while, Maddie, who also works there, walks over to Becky and says, "Sandra thinks you left the door open last night." But Becky shakes her head and says, "It wasn't me. Kevin left it open, but I didn't tell Sandra because he might lose his job." Maddie looks at Becky for a moment and realizes she's telling the truth. Without saying anything else, she nods and gets back to work. A few hours later, around noon, the restaurant phone rings. Sandra picks up, and on the other end, a police officer named Daniel starts speaking. He says, "A man just came to me and said the money stolen from your restaurant was taken by one of your workers. He claims he saw Becky steal it with his own eyes." After a pause, Daniel adds, "I have a team of officers ready to investigate, but if they come in, it could hurt your restaurant's reputation. That's why I think you can help me handle this quietly." Sandra, now feeling uneasy, grips the phone tighter and asks, "How can I help?" Daniel's voice stays calm. "First, bring Becky to the back of the restaurant and let me talk to her." Sandra doesn't waste a second. She grabs Becky and takes her to the back of the restaurant, explaining everything as they walk. Once there, she dials Daniel and hands Becky the phone. Becky, her voice firm, says, "I haven't done anything like this." But Daniel responds, "A man came to me and said he saw you stealing from Sandra's purse." Becky's heart pounds, but before she can say anything, Daniel adds, "Let me talk to Sandra." When Sandra takes the phone, Daniel tells her, "You'll need to search Becky's purse." Sandra immediately snatches Becky's purse and gives her a sharp look. "If I find my money in here, you're fired on the spot." She digs through the purse, checking every pocket, but after a moment, she stops and sighs. "There's nothing here," she tells Daniel. Daniel's voice is firm as he tells Sandra, "Keep Becky detained in the restaurant." He also insists that Sandra must assist him over the phone. Sandra hesitates before saying, "Becky has never done anything wrong before." But Daniel doesn't budge. "If she turns out to be innocent, I will take full responsibility for this, and whatever punishment the law gives me, I will accept it." Sandra sighs and hands the phone back to Becky. Becky, her voice shaking, says, "Sir, I have never done anything wrong in my life, and I am not a thief." Daniel listens, then calmly gives her two choices. The first, she will be arrested and taken to jail for theft. The second, she must remove all her clothes and allow Sandra to search her. Becky feels completely shaken when she hears the two options. She doesn't want to go to jail, so she agrees to remove her clothes and let Sandra search her. However, she asks Daniel, "Can Maddie be present when Sandra searches me?" Daniel agrees to Becky's request without hesitation. At that moment, Sandra starts to feel suspicious. "Are you speaking from a phone booth, or are you somehow watching us?" she asks. Daniel stays silent, not answering her question. Sandra, feeling uneasy, decides to ignore it for now. She goes to get Maddie, explains the situation, and brings her to the back of the restaurant. With everything set, Becky begins removing her clothes, one by one. Sandra carefully checks each item, but there's nothing. She picks up the phone again and tells Daniel, "I didn't find anything in her clothes." Daniel calmly replies, "You'll also need to check Becky's undergarments now." Becky, left with no choice, removes her undergarments and stands there, fully exposed. Maddie, feeling deep sympathy for Becky, watches the situation unfold. She picks up an apron and gently hands it to Becky, offering her some modesty and comfort. Daniel's voice comes through the phone. "There's a car parked outside your restaurant. You need to place all of Becky's clothes in that car. I'll examine them thoroughly later." Sandra, without saying anything, gathers Becky's clothes and places them in the car Daniel mentioned. Once she returns, she sends Maddie back to work and informs Daniel, "I've done everything as you instructed." She then adds, "I need to get back to work too, or our business will suffer." Daniel agrees, but gives one last instruction. "Fine, you can go back to work, but you need to call someone to keep an eye on Becky." Agreeing to Daniel's request, Sandra goes to Kevin, explains everything, and brings him to the back of the restaurant. She tells him that he needs to keep an eye on Becky for some time. When Kevin sees Becky sitting there without clothes, his face turns red with anger. He storms up and says, "Becky is not a thief. She would never do something like this." But Daniel doesn't back down. "You need to inspect Becky," he says calmly. Kevin's temper flares even more. "You already made her remove all her clothes, and now you're asking for another inspection?" He clenches his fists and asks, "What kind of inspection are you talking about?" Daniel's response is cold. "You'll need to check Becky's private parts." Hearing this, Kevin is absolutely furious. He yells at Daniel, curses him him out and says, "To hell with you and your inspection." Kevin turns to leave, but just then, he bumps into Sandra, who is coming in. He pauses, apologizes, and says, "I can't help you with this matter." Sandra speaks to Daniel, and he tells her that Kevin is not the right person to keep an eye on Becky. "Do you know someone who can properly watch over Becky?" he asks. Sandra thinks for a moment and then mentions her fiancé. Daniel responds, "You'll need to call your fiancé and ask him to help with this task." Sandra feels uneasy about the request, but decides to call her fiancé, Val, and asks him to come to the restaurant. When Val arrives, however, Sandra notices he is heavily intoxicated. She explains the entire situation to him and leaves him to watch over Becky, hoping that he can handle the responsibility. Meanwhile, Daniel speaks to Val on the phone and tells him, "Ask Becky to remove her apron." Though Val is intoxicated, he's still able to understand what Daniel wants. He firmly refuses to follow the instructions. Daniel then says, "Let me talk to Becky." When Becky picks up the phone, Daniel tells her, "If you want to avoid going to jail, you'll have to do exactly as Val says." Becky, feeling trapped, reluctantly agrees and removes her apron right in front of Val, once again completely exposed. In a very demeaning tone, Daniel asks Val about Becky's body parts, specifically their size. Val, however, doesn't respond to this question. Daniel then explains to Val that the man who claimed to have seen Becky stealing mentioned noticing some marks on her chest. "That's why you need to confirm whether those marks are present," Daniel says. From Val's slurred voice, Daniel realizes he is intoxicated. Seizing the moment, Daniel crafts a clever trick. He tells Val, "You'll need to ask Becky to jump so that if the stolen money is hidden, it will fall out from her private parts." Despite feeling uncomfortable, Becky, under Val's influence and Daniel's instructions, begins to jump. When no money falls out, Daniel calmly tells Val, "You'll have to personally check Becky's private parts." Val, already drawn to Becky, doesn't hesitate. He starts checking her, unaware of Daniel's true intentions. By now, Becky follows Daniel's every instruction without question. Just as Val is doing this, Sandra approaches. Before she can see anything, Val quickly stops. Suspicious, Sandra asks, "What were you doing?" Val says nothing. Feeling uneasy, Sandra reaches out to Daniel. With a sweet and convincing tone, Daniel skillfully eases her doubts. Sandra believes everything is fine and walks away. Daniel looked at Val and said, "You need to slap Becky on her backside." Without hesitation, Val obeyed, striking Becky again and again, each slap stinging more than the last. Daniel then turned to Becky. "You need to do one more thing, and after that, you'll be free. I won't take any further action against you." She looked at him, desperate for a way out. Daniel's voice was calm but firm. "You'll have to become intimate with Val and fully satisfy." Becky's stomach turned. She hesitated, disgusted by the idea, but she wanted this nightmare to end. With no real choice, she forced herself to agree. Time passed. The room fell into an eerie silence. Then Sandra arrived with food for them. She stepped inside and saw Becky and Val sitting there, wordless, avoiding her eyes. The silence told her everything. By now, night had fallen, and a heavy shame settled over Val. His intoxication had mostly worn off, leaving him unable to even look Becky in the eyes. Sandra watched him closely, confused by his strange behavior. She couldn't figure out what had happened. Daniel stepped in smoothly. "Val seems quite tired, so you should send him home." Without question, Sandra agreed, and Val quickly left. He climbed into his car, his mind racing, and called a friend over to his house. When his friend arrived, Val finally admitted the terrible mistake he had made while intoxicated. His voice shook as he spoke. Regret hit him like a wave, drowning him in guilt he couldn't escape. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, one of Sandra's friends, Harold, came to visit her. Seeing him, Sandra's face lit up with happiness. But at the back of the restaurant, something remained unseen. Every corner was under surveillance cameras, silently recording everything. That meant all of Val's actions with Becky had been captured. Sandra, unaware of the footage, convinced Harold to keep an eye on Becky for a while. She left him there and returned to work. Later, Daniel approached Harold. In a hushed voice, he revealed everything that Val had done to Becky. Harold listened, his expression shifting as the weight of the story sank in. Then Daniel leaned in and said something that made Harold freeze. "You also need to become intimate with Becky." Hearing this, Harold was stunned. He wasted no time. He rushed to Sandra and told her everything. He explained what Daniel had forced Val to do to Becky and how he was now pressuring him to do the same. Sandra's eyes widened as the truth hit her. Daniel was no police officer. Without hesitation, she grabbed her phone and called the real police. telling them everything and urging them to come to the restaurant immediately. Minutes later, the police arrived and began questioning everyone. When they turned to Becky and asked why she hadn't stopped Daniel, her voice was shaky but clear. "I was very scared, and I just wanted to be free from all of this." The officers took her statement and launched a deeper investigation. They made calls to various cities and uncovered a shocking pattern. Similar crimes had happened elsewhere. Tracking Daniel's phone number, they traced his location. When they finally found him, the truth was bizarre. Daniel wasn't some mastermind or officer. He was just a telemarketer, hiding behind lies. The police arrested him on the spot, ensuring he would face justice for everything he had done. Later, Becky takes a bold step. She files a case against Sandra in court for the mistreatment she endured. As the legal process unfolds, Sandra faces serious consequences. She loses her job and is fined, her reputation crumbling before her eyes. A few days later, desperate to clear her name, Sandra sits down for an interview. She struggles to defend herself, her voice filled with urgency. "I didn't know that Daniel was pretending to be a fake police officer," she insists. "I was just trying to solve the problem over the phone to protect the reputation of my restaurant." Her words hang in the air, but whether people believe her or not remains uncertain. And with that, the movie comes to an end. So, which awesome movie should we recap next? Drop your suggestions in the comments below and let's make it happen. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button so you never miss out on our movie recaps. We've got plenty more coming your way. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Produced by Warner Movie Recaps.